King here, bringing you another gaming video today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about character stats. So if you don't know, in Baldur's Gate 3 specifically, the character stats that you use are more impactful to how your character plays than anything that is specific to their class identity. So essentially, strength governing your character's ability to wield large two-handed weapons well, or maces and flails and bludgeoning weapons and hammers and all of those things. Strength pairs very, very well. Dexterity affects your ability to wield swords, bows, daggers, those types of weapons efficiently. But it also affects your armor class. So, for example, before we even think about this, before we even go into specifically what class we want to play in Baldur's Gate, you actually want to make a determination for your character on the stats you want to run. This actually matters more. This is more impactful than this in many respects. Bit of a hot take there, but that's what I found with this game specifically. So, for example, we go +2, and then we go 15 strength, right? If you don't know, every 2 levels of strength, you essentially get a +1 to your attack rolls. So, like, if you're creating, let's say, a fighter, there is no world where you do not have 14 or 15 strength. And the way that you make that determination of whether it's 14 or 15 strength is basically how high your secondary ability might be, right? Specifically. Right? So this is actually going to be 17. It doesn't show in the build calculator, but it's +2. So this is going to be 17 strength, and then this is going to be 16 constitution. But at the end of the day, you can just round it off even. So 16 strength, 16 constitution as your essentially starting stats for a fighter in specifically in honor mode is going to be a very strong start. So 16, always aim for 16 strength, 16 constitution if you're playing a fighter. What your tertiary stat is largely up to you. That's the thing. That's when things get a little more complicated in regards to playing this game efficiently. For example, having something like 14 dexterity would be very efficient for dodging fireballs, right? So if you want your fighter to essentially have a better roll chance at dodging AoE spells, this is governed by dexterity. Even things like a Dragon's Breath attack, late game, is governed by dexterity. It's not governed by any other stat. So, like, if you want your fighter to be better at dodging breath attacks and fireballs and things like that, dexterity is your go-to. But you won't get any armor class bonus in your plate mail. That's not how that works. Alternatively, because in honor mode, a lot of the challenge is actually dialogue-based, you could have a high charisma fighter. There's nothing really stopping you from using intimidation checks as a fighter as a way of making things easier for you in honor mode. There are bosses that can literally be flat out killed with dialogue checks. There are a lot of story progression elements that are much easier with correct dialogue checks. So just having a fighter with high charisma and then choosing the skills of like persuasion and intimidation will make your life much, much easier as the main character. So, like, your actual stats that you choose here, having 16 strength, having 16 constitution, and then choosing a tertiary stat that is highly relevant, is actually going to have, like, more of a substantial impact on the way that your character plays. So, you could do something like this spread here, which is 16 strength, 16 constitution, 10 dexterity, so at least you're dodging fireballs evenly with your roll chances. So it's like average dodge chance. Wisdom, there's a lot of illithid checks in the game that are like specific to the story progression, like your tadpole kind of thing. That's all wisdom based. So at least you'll have average roll chance there. And then charisma, you're going to have a better roll chance for intimidation and persuasion checks. So something like this spread here very specifically would be very easy for dealing with what the game has on offer. And then what you decide to do past that point doesn't really matter that much. So for example, we go to skill checks. Like we said, we already want to make sure that we have intimidation. We 100% want to have intimidation, right? So like we're basically just going in on charisma for intimidation checks. And then the other skill you choose is probably like something that's strength related, athletics, for example. athletics being essentially a stat that allows you to push people, not get pushed. And like you're basically done. Like this is a perfect start